Given the name stem cell transplant, you'd likely think that the actual transplanting of the stem cells is the most climactic part of the procedure. Not the case. Similar to when my mom harvested her stem cells, I wasn't actually there to witness the infusion of those harvested stem cells. My sister was in town as her caregiver during that time of the week when my dad and I were working back in Wichita, Kansas at the family dental practice. We were all nervous the day that my mom was going to have the transplant because none of us had an awareness about what was actually going to happen, and we didn't know anyone who had gone through a stem cell transplant previously. So we just anticipated that it would be painful or strenuous or stressful in some way, but we were all pleasantly surprised when it turned out to be very anticlimactic. It was just truly an infusion of the stem cells that she had harvested. There was no pain involved with it. It went very quickly. The only notable occurrence was that the smell of creamed corn got really dense and thick in her room, which then spilled over into the unit because the preservative that's used to keep the stem cells fresh when they're cryogenically frozen, when it thaws, it just reeks of creamed corn for some reason. And it was lingering so heavily that even the next day when we came in, the odor was still very present, which is mentioned in this moment because my dad had thought that since we had arrived from Wichita an hour or so earlier, my mom had just been perpetually farting, which is the reason for that weird odor. When it came time to have my own autologous stem cell transplant on August 1st, 2022, I was hoping for the best, but then expecting the worst because I remembered that my mom had been very distracted during her harvesting of her stem cell, and she didn't remark about it being uncomfortable whatsoever. So I was wondering if the same situation had occurred with the actual infusion of her stem cells, because Leisha was there and she could have just been talking her up the entire time. So maybe my mom just overlooked something that actually was pretty uncomfortable during the process, or maybe she just had a much smoother process than most everyone does, and I would be the unlucky sap like I was with the harvesting of my stem cells. On the day of my transplant, my nurse was joined by an individual from the cryogenesis lab of the hospital who brought in my stem cells in this large cylindrical container that was keeping them frozen even as they navigated the hospital. She also brought in this cart that had this device on the top that would be used to thaw the pouches of the stem cells in the room with us so that they can be immediately transferred into my body due to the sensitivity of the stem cells and the time between when they could be thawed out and when they had to be inside of me. Because I had harvested so many stem cells, over 5 million, there was multiple pouches that had to go through this process. As the lab technician thawed out the first pouch, my nurse was readying my PICC line, and she explained to me that unlike all the other infusions I had had during my hospitalization, the stem cells would not run through the IV pump. They required a much faster rate of infusion than even the IV pump could provide, so she was going to have to do them manually. Because of that fast rate of infusion, she warned that I would experience shortness of breath, but that I shouldn't have any other type of side effects. And she was right. I did feel like I couldn't get in a full breath just because for some reason all the stem cells coming into my heart so quickly and then being pumped out just for whatever reason made it so that I just couldn't catch my breath ever, but it wasn't uncomfortable in any way. And she was very thorough. She was monitoring me closely to make sure that she wasn't going too fast and that I could catch up with my breathing. I also felt a little chilly through the process just because I think that the stem cells were still pretty cold as they were coming into me and then pumping through my body. From start to finish, it took about 30 minutes, and then the lab technician rolled away her devices, and then the nurse left me, and I was just hanging out with my 5.1 million stem cells circulating throughout my body. Later that day, I had a session of Reiki, which is a form of energy healing, from a practitioner who is affiliated with the hospital. It was a free service that you could opt into. It wasn't forced on anyone. It was also very LA in a way that was so different from seeing my mom go through her stem cell transplant in Omaha, Nebraska. I have this session. It's about 20 minutes long. It's mostly me just laying there with my eyes closed, listening to the calming music that she was playing as she was basically working with my energy without touching me, just moving her hands over my body and looking for stagnations and blockages that she was resolving with her energy healing. As she was finishing up and getting ready to leave, she mentioned that during the session, she had felt another presence working within my energy fields, and she asked if I knew who that might have been. The first person that came into mind was this friend of mine from New York who was a multifaceted shaman who I actually had a session of Reiki with before I had moved to California, so I knew that she could do Reiki. So I texted that individual, and she let me know that she hadn't been working in my energy fields. However, about 5 minutes later, she started blowing up my phone with messages because my mom, I guess, had started coming to her because she was a medium as well. And she confirmed that it was my mom who was actually working within my energy to make sure that the stem cells were implanting properly. And she was also relaying messages to me through my friend, including, she's telling me she's with you the whole time and the whole way. She's not leaving your side. And you're her soul baby in such a big way. She loves you so much. I started sobbing with appreciation and gratitude, and who knows if those messages were actually coming from my mom, and who knows if my mom was actually working in those energetic fields. But in that moment, it felt true to me, and it made me feel so much better about the prospect of the stem cell transplant actually working and me attaining a permanent remission. In that moment, I also thought about the fact that my mom was showing up for my stem cell transplant like I had shown up for hers. And I was deeply grateful to have her by my side, even if it meant that it was just in spirit form and not physically. On July 25th, I'll be releasing a video about how things can turn on a dime while you're going through cancer treatment. So hit subscribe, leave any questions in the comments. The link to the book is in the description, and I'll see you all on the 25th.